headed into the new year to heal mentally and physically, looking for a trauma-informed yoga practice or trauma-informed exercise routine, let's talk about how you can do that for yourself. Hi, I'm Jessica Johns-Green. I'm a licensed professional counselor, 200-hour yoga teacher, and also an avid Olympic weightlifter. I've been engaged in that for about the past 13 years. And so I have a lot to say about using physical movement, using the body to help heal emotionally and psychologically. And if you're looking for a trauma-informed yoga practice or a trauma-informed form of exercise or a coach or a personal trainer to help you with that, you might be lucky enough to find things like that in your local area. And if that's you, great. But I think these things are pretty difficult to find, and even if you do find them, it's hard to get them on a regular basis. So it feels useful to know how you can take any sort of exercise, physical movement, yoga practice, and make it trauma informed by thinking a little bit about with me what trauma is, what's going on in the body, and how to best decide what you need and when to make whatever you're doing, whatever practice, whatever workout, trauma informed. So first of all, I always feel like it's really useful to revisit what trauma is. Quite often when we say the word trauma, we hear the word trauma on social media, on the internet, we're thinking about really the symptoms that go along with what we call the traumatic stress. So flashbacks or being stuck in some sort of like flight or fight kind of freeze state, a lot of anxiety, having nightmares or difficulties in our environment, maybe difficulties with work or with engaging with people in our relationship, suffering, mood up and down. All those things are really the symptoms. What trauma is, what causes those symptoms, is when we hit an overwhelming experience. And in order to survive and to cope effectively with that overwhelming experience, the body and the mind sort of start to go on separate tracks. So that might look like becoming very dissociated during that time, running away, fleeing either physically or psychologically. And so that's what trauma is. And, if, circumstances or our resources allow, when that overwhelming situation stops, we can come back together, body and mind link up, and we sort of process it and move on with life. The symptoms that we're describing when someone is really stuck in traumatic stress, or that what we think of as the result of trauma, is that kind of consistently being divided, right, in order to survive, in a way. Body and mind kind of doing separate things. The body might be containing a lot of the trauma, and the mind is just kind of carrying on with everyday stuff. Or maybe the opposite. The mind is carrying a lot of like the memories and the trauma, and the body's just kind of, doing its own thing. And so bringing those two together can be really useful. A lot of the times when we think about, things like flashbacks or nightmares, is when the body and mind are kind of surviving in that separated state, and something happens to kind of bring them together, and we're not quite prepared for it. And then it's like all the memories come back, or we realize, oh my goodness, my body is in this state of, alert, or wow, I've been, thinking about this really horrible thing and I didn't even realize it. And so it's kind of forced back together, either, something sensory in our environment or a sound or a person or something brings it back, and then suddenly we're back together. And it's too overwhelming again. It feels like that thing is happening again. So, because the effects of trauma, the stress that we live with after trauma, the traumatic stress, is equally in the body as in the mind, using some kind of physical intervention can be very useful to help to heal that. So, what makes a movement, an exercise program, a yoga practice trauma informed is coming at it from that understanding that we are going to have ways that body and mind want to separate and we want to bring them back together. Now, that separation might be helped with more calming, mindful movements, moving slowly, really listening to that breath. That connection might also be helped with really energetic movements. Is there a right or wrong way? Well, it kind of depends. It depends on, what you like, what you prefer. And it might also depend on what you notice in those stages before, during, and after. You know, are you coming into it feeling a certain way? What are you noticing during? Are you connected or disconnected? And afterwards, how are you able to then go forward in your day engaged with life? So, just to give an example of how this can look different for different people, this, pretty interesting book, Lifting Heavy Things, is about a trauma informed approach to weightlifting. I read it with great interest because for me, I entered into the world of Olympic weightlifting kind of almost by accident. To be honest, I was very traumatized and looking for an escape. In the book, what the author talks about is using the movement to reclaim a feeling of agency and strength in her body, and appreciation for her body. And this is how she helps her clients too, to help to overcome that feeling of maybe helplessness that comes from a trauma. Now, I can attest that that was definitely an element for me too, that was, very, very needed. On the other hand, if you're someone who is good at, maybe being an overworker, or you have maybe an addictive personality, those things are probably going to be ways that you are dealing with your trauma. And so while it wasn't a bad thing, right? For me, as an example, to get involved in weightlifting, it definitely gave me a feeling of strength and a feeling of agency, like the author refers to. But it also could become a huge way to distract and dissociate from some of the feelings that I needed to connect to. That was just me. I still weightlift. I found a way through that, but it was through awareness, recognizing that, I'm kind of like grouchy until I have my training, my workout, and then I'm sort of detached. And then afterwards, there's maybe a euphoric period before I'm just like no good really to anybody else. I don't really want to talk. I don't want to deal with problems. I don't want to deal with emotions. And so that's just a little example to think about how to reason your way through. If you have something that you really love to do, you love to run or you love to do something very active, it doesn't mean don't do it. But if you're going to take a trauma-informed approach to it, starting to recognize, is there a tipping point where your mind is becoming separated from your body, and what can you do to adjust the intensity, to adjust the mindset, to maybe bring them back together. It Going back to me as an example, what really helped was to add in some things that were outside of my comfort zone. So actually going into the yoga world and doing not an active form of yoga, but a very slow form of yoga called yin yoga, where we are just holding a stretch for a super long time, and all you're left with is your breath and the feeling in your body. And so you almost have to connect. And so maybe adding some things in that are out of our comfort zone can be really useful in holistically developing a trauma-informed approach to whatever movement you're doing. And I would say the same goes for the other end of the spectrum. If you're someone who, is looking for a trauma-informed approach and you really love those kind of like, you know, chilled out things, if you find yourself getting like into a very slow yoga class and you're almost like getting detached, in that way, you're kind of just in the feelings and you're not really attached to your body. Or if you're no good sort of before, after, and you're just living for that time, then maybe it's an opportunity to kind of switch it up a bit, bringing a little bit more energy into your practice now and again, or just something with a little bit more of a sort of intense, energetic feel to it, can help to balance that out. So what's often happening as the body and mind separate, what's going on in the nervous system through that trauma, is that the activity of the nervous system has a sort of a zone where we feel good. We get a little bit energized, a little bit relaxed, energized, relaxed. But if it's within that zone, we're good. Trauma will send us either way sky high, so way out of that zone of tolerance, or way down low to where we don't feel good. We don't feel good at those super highs. We don't feel good at those super lows. And so by looking at yourself and starting to reconnect, what is my body doing? What is my breathing like? What is my activity level like? Where am I on a moment-to-moment basis? We're going to be able to start to identify, am I someone who's, sky high, kind of, super active nervous system, very anxious, very overworking, very up here? Or am I more of a super depressed, super inactive, dissociative kind of person down here? And wherever you are, and whichever one your body prefers to be, you're going to be in both at certain times. So making your movement patterns trauma informed is about starting to notice what state I'm in, both habitually and in the current moment. And so what is needed for me right now? Now, one of the challenges is that not everyone around you is going to understand what you're doing. That's okay. Let them do what they do. Let them think what they think. Around exercise, and especially I realize this is the new year, there's going to be a lot of, preconceived ideas and beliefs that people have about why we work out. Or why we're moving our body, why you're doing a yoga practice. Oh, you want to tone up, or you want to lose weight, or whatever. And so people might not get it. Even in yoga classes, I have been in yoga classes, and I have heard people tell me that in yoga classes, even though we would expect that there would be a mindful approach and that the instructor would be encouraging the student to do things that feel right for you. Do it at your own pace. Stop when you need to. Sometimes, things get carried away, and the teacher may not realize that they feel like they're being encouraging, but actually what they're doing is maybe forcing someone to go beyond what they feel comfortable that day, or to compromise, say, that trauma-informed approach they're trying to take. So just be prepared to go your own way. Just be prepared to, leave people confused, leave them disappointed, be on your business about this and healing your body in your way. I think the second challenge that I would bring in, so the first one is, other people's perceptions and how you need to sometimes say no to their expectations, right? If you're going to develop a trauma-informed practice. I think the second challenge is that, again, once you enter the kind of like fitness world, there is so much focus on appearance and on body. And, I don't want to say that, I know this is true in every circumstance. Like maybe, you feel differently, but in my experience, it feels at least fairly universal that once the movement that you're doing is becoming tied to an appearance-based outcome, you're going to have a lot of difficulty making that trauma informed. And I don't know, like, I don't want to take away from people who are in like aesthetic based, goals, or, sports like bodybuilding. But when it comes to healing trauma, and again, that separation of body and mind, one way that people have to, remain in that separation is to focus everything on the physical, how I look, what others think of how I look, measurements around size or body fat or whatever. These appearance related focus is another way to keep that separation going, because in the focus on appearance, we're not necessarily connected with what the body needs or what the body feels. It's more about that kind of, do it for this goal rather than do it for the connection and the holistic thing. So, I'm only just saying this as a challenge so that you can stay on your guard against all of the things that you might experience, all of the things you might hear, the different kinds of people that you might run into that are more aesthetic and appearance focused. And, just see that as, okay, that's where they're at. That's what they want. If you want a trauma-informed practice, it's about uniting that body and mind, and not using appearance as a way to create a sense of security or safety or control. The control comes through body and mind feeling safe and connected together, and being able to meet the needs of, your environment and your nervous system, of the inside and the outside, in a very connected and present way. So I don't know, maybe you have a different opinion about that. That's just something that I think I experience, and I hear other people experience, particularly when they get involved in a fitness space. But, I really, whatever you do, stay healthy, stay happy. I would love to hear your comments, your thoughts. Drop them down below. It helps me so much, and I'm so grateful if you can drop a like or even subscribe. And until next time, be well.